My name is Andy Sparkman. I'm our Hebrew teacher here, and today is my honor to bring you today's Torah portion. I went back just to prepare for this. I wanted to go back and listen. I think we're lucky now. We're just getting to the point where we can see 2 years now of Torah portions. So I went back 2 years ago, and Joshua did this Torah portion 2 years ago. Last year, Miguel did this Torah portion. Both had the same feeling that I did, so I'll admit it right off the bat. This is the one that's going to make you feel uncomfortable. If you thought I made you feel uncomfortable last time, because we talked about sacrifices, oh boy, this is even worse. But just like any passage, if you take it too superficially and you look at that passage and you say, I don't get it, you're probably underestimating the passage, which is definitely true in today's passage. You don't want to overlook this one. You don't want to read it too fast with a squeamish stomach and say, there can't really be anything in here, can there? It just, ugh. We're going to start off with certain things that will make you unclean. A woman having birth and the discharge, the blood that comes from that, it makes someone unclean. Infectious skin diseases, they're normally translated as leprosy, but it's really not leprosy. I don't think anybody could look at the description of the symptoms and say it's exactly the same. It's just not. It's something else. But if we really want to do justice to this passage, we got to go right into the part where it's most uncomfortable. I want to start off with just a quick aside. When a woman has a child, there is a discharge of blood, a lot of blood. But after that, there's 7 days of purification if the child was a boy, and then 33 more days of purification before she can bring a sacrifice. A total of 40 days. And what does she bring at the end of that? Well, she brings a couple of offerings. One is a burnt offering, and one is a sin offering. Does that bother anybody? Yeah, you too? That's it? Just the two of us? We're the only two uncomfortable about that? It just seems weird, right? It's not a sin to have a baby. It's the first commandment God gave people in the Bible. Be fruitful and multiply. Have babies. You should. But this brings a sin offering. And I want to talk about that. Actually, I'm going to build to it. So I'm not just going to give you a one-word answer that just blows your mind. It actually takes a little bit of analysis. Let's look at it. Secondly, the sin offering is only one of the two things I want to pull out from this as a quick aside before we jump in. 40 days? Why 40? What does 40 mean in the Bible? I hear the same thing. Trial, tribulation. I'm not so sure, though. I want to make another suggestion. So I looked this number up because it's not consistent to me every single time I look at this. What you'll normally think about is, 40 days wandering in the wilderness. That was a judgment. Jesus was in the wilderness also for 40 days. That wasn't a judgment, though. And if it was a trial, he put it upon himself. We don't have any reason to say that, that's something bad he did. Maybe it was for testing. Here's my suggestion. Let's look at it a different perspective. Before he goes to the wilderness, he's just a normal guy. He's not doing a ministry. Afterwards, he begins his ministry. Okay? That's an elevation. It's a transition from a lower state to a higher state. When the people of Israel come out of Egypt, they're so disobedient. They're like a bunch of slaves with slave mentality. It takes the next generation to step up and go into the promised land. And I have another transition from a lower to a higher level. When a woman becomes a mother, there is another transition. Nothing against a woman who chooses not to have a baby, but there is something special about motherhood. And anybody who can't see that, I feel sorry for you. There is a beautiful transition where a woman has the sacred, beautiful, caring relationship with her child. And it's got to be the most beautiful thing in this world. It makes the world worth living for. That 40 isn't always something bad. You might go through trials to go from one level to another. And it's not easy having a baby. But it's also not something that you should assume someone is going through because they deserve it. It's not necessarily a judgment. So that was a quick aside. Now I want to get into this a little bit. What does Tazria mean? One of the only places, as far as I know, and Joshua brought this up 2 years ago, and I appreciate him bringing it up, this is a very unusual word to mean she conceives or she will conceive. I highlighted the letters in here. It actually means she bears seed. It's absolutely true. It's a literal meaning. Those 3 letters there, the Zion, the Resh, and the Ayin, that means seed. The tav at the beginning is a prefix that indicates that she will do something. She will bear a seed. That's all it means. But it's not the normal word for she will conceive. And you also don't normally think about woman as bearing seed. You think of the man bearing the seed, not the woman. But I only bring that up just to encourage you. Go back and listen to Joshua's explanation of that. It's great. This passage is so overlooked. It's embarrassing how much there is. He brought up a lot. I'm not going to bring up the same points. I'm going to take this in a different direction than he did. So let me just jump into that a little bit, though. In order to bring up my points, I just want to look at, once again, the book of Leviticus and the structure. If I'm looking at a passage that I find difficult, you may want to look at the way it's structured. You may want to look for the parallels between this passage and other passages. It helps to enlighten you on what it's saying. Sometimes what it's not saying is what you should look for. In this case, let's talk at a high level first. The entire book of Leviticus, what's it for? Yes, Levites, priests. It's about holiness, right? The entire book. I want to make a suggestion to you. If you just look at this entire thing, the beginning and the end of this thing, it summarizes all of the sacrifices, all the korbanot are at the beginning, all of the feasts are at the very end. I want to suggest to you, there is one feast that starts it all. The Shlamim feast, Passover. If it wasn't for Passover, there'd be nothing else. Passover establishes the nation. It establishes the covenant between God and his people. That, if I am going to give you a gift today, the box itself is Passover. The Shlamim, it's the covenant. I want to have a covenant with you. Inside this box, there are many things that come with this covenant. Okay? You can't pick and choose. You can either take my box or nothing. Inside that box, the most precious gift is what you find in the middle, the Yom Kippur service. Okay? It's the most precious, but it's not the only thing. If I go by outer layer to inner layer, I would say the outsides look like Shlamim, it's covenant. I go inside one layer, and the passages in the brown bars, maybe I should have made those primary colors. I think Microsoft PowerPoint likes earth tones. So the earthy tone, just inside the red, those are about the priests. It's about dedication. It is the burnt offering. The burnt offering's just inside the Shlamim. Just inside that, you get to the inner two, just outside the Yom Kippur service. You've got 2 interesting things that are compared to each other. You have things that cause you to be ritually impure, that require a sin offering. That is opposed to sin. Almost no sin offering is mentioned on that right-hand side. So that's what I want to get into a little bit today, just to make my point on what you can get out of today's passage by doing just a little analysis. As a reminder, this slide summarizes very quickly what a sin offering includes. The sin offering could be any one of these animals. It depends on who you are. The priest brings the bull. A ruler brings the goat. The female goat or female lamb could be brought by a normal person of means. If you do not have means, then you can bring the doves. If you remember the New Testament passage, Jesus' mother Mary, she brought doves at the end of her days of purification. It indicates that they were a family that didn't have the means of others. They were not a wealthy family. Important things, though, to note about it. Well, the most important thing, I think, is this is most holy. It must be eaten by the priest. And if you read the passages just before this, you'll see a time when the priest did not eat this. They allowed the sin offering to be completely consumed on the altar. And you might read it one way in English, but in Hebrew, it actually looks like he makes them eat it. Eat what? I don't know, the ashes? It's too holy not to eat. They must eat the sin offering. The priest that brings it must eat it. It's most holy. Okay, but that's that for the sin offering. Here's where I want to spend all of the rest of my time. On one slide. Can you all see that slide? Okay, good. The important words are tameh and tahor. Tahor is clean. It's what you want to be. Tameh is unclean. It probably is best translated, honestly, I don't know. It's a tough word to translate. It can mean ritually impure, but it's more than that. There's just not a good English word for it. Let's look at some of the context that it's used. When a woman has a baby, that discharge of blood that comes out makes her tameh. Okay? It's used there. But it's also used in other places that seem really different. If you think about Jacob, his daughter, Dinah, she was also made tameh, but because she was raped. It's the same Hebrew word in both situations. It's tough to come up with an English word that means them both. So if you think of unclean, think of a spectrum. Unhygienic versus sinful, it's all covered in the same word. It's a big word. But let's just look at the list. So the list, I created two lists here. One on the left corresponds with that left orange bar that I showed you before. Remember, the entire book of Leviticus is structured in a chiastic structure. And so I'm focusing on that first orange bar, the purity laws. Okay? And this is compared and contrasted to the other orange bar, and I'm going to do that step by step here with you. On the left-hand side, we start off with clean and unclean animals, various things that you may not eat. Unclean animals are not food. But even clean animals can be tameh. It just depends. You have to drain the blood. If you do not drain the blood, even a clean animal will become tameh. It's unclean to you, and you are not to eat it. You must kill the animal, drain the blood, and then you may eat it. You also find childbirth. I mentioned that now a couple of times. The monthly cycle of a woman is also in here. She is tameh during that cycle. Infectious skin diseases of all sorts are described in here. While you have one of these, you are tameh. In the next Torah portion, you'll find other things that make you unclean. Any bodily discharges can make you unclean. Male or female, it doesn't matter. They all make you unclean. And none of them are a sin. But they could, depending on the severity of them, they could require you to bring a sin offering. Okay? Now, let's look at that second list. That second list is it's a doozy, man. Just look through all those things. First of all, you won't sacrifice anywhere except the tent of meeting or eventually the temple. No one is doing sacrifices in their backyards anymore. All the way back here with Moses, this is where it stops. It's not allowed. You may not eat blood. You may not drink blood. There is a long list of sexual relations that are immoral. There's also just a general list of morality, including honoring your father and mother, the 10 Commandments. Obey God and do what he does. Don't do what the Canaanites do. Don't do what the Egyptians did. Do what I'm telling you, because you're holy. The same reasons why you eat clean, you eat kosher, is the same reasons why you honor your father and mother. To be holy, to be set apart, to be special, to not be like the world. They're the same reasons given, both sides. The big difference, though, we veer off big time on the second list in the fact that the remedy is not the same. If I were to tell you on that first list, a woman who has a child, she has a few things that she needs to do. She needs to wash her clothes, and at the end of her purification, she will bring her sacrifices. That's it. Monthly cycle, just wash. Infectious skin diseases, it depends. You may need nothing more than to wash yourself. You may need to wash your clothes. You may need to shave, depending on how severe the skin disease was. You may need to shave your entire body. You may need to bring a guilt offering and a burnt offering. Your house can become infected. What's the remedy? Clean it. It's like good hygiene. If you can't clean it because it keeps coming back, knock the wall down and build a new one. And so what do you see on that left side? You see a lot of things that you probably wouldn't bat an eyelash at those things. Of course, I'm going to tear down that wall because it's got mold in it. It's making us sick inside the house. So that makes sense. The remedy is to clean. Let me get back to the sacrifices in a minute, though. I don't want to cover that just yet. Let's go to the other side, though. What's that other list? Okay? Eat blood. You drink blood. What are we going to do? Are we going to wash to cure that? Bring a sacrifice? No. You're going to cut that person off from his people. Forbidden sexual relations. Male to male, brother to sister, mother to son, you name it. What is the consequence of any of those forbidden relationships? Death. There's no sin offering for that. Dishonor your father and mother, what's the consequence? Death. It's not a sin offering. It's not a guilt offering. It's death. Pretty much everything that you can define as sin doesn't bring a sin offering. None of them. There's a very big difference between sin and sin offering. The sin offering is like the culmination of things that you do to become clean when you've become unhygienically dirty. But a sin does not equal sin offering. You can't. It's not in here. I've read the thing multiple times. I don't see where God says, just bring a sin offering and 3 Hail Marys. Sorry, I just threw that one in. That was free. I'm not Catholic, so I wouldn't know. That's what I just find interesting. Every single thing Christians call sin has nothing to do with the sin offering. You can't bring a sin offering for it. You put the person to death. That's it. Or cut them off from their people. So let me make now a broad point with this. When it comes to some of these obvious things, like I said, okay, I'm dirty. Okay, I touched an animal that was unclean. Now what? Well, go wash yourself. Okay? Who in this room finds that strange? Nobody. But let's just say that that what it is that makes you unclean is a little bit more substantial than that. You have to bring a sin offering. How many people would just want to do that? So I think that here's one of my points I want to make here before I move into the conclusion. I want to make sure that you don't lose this. We here as modern people stand up in front of people, up on our high horse, whatever it is. We like to look down on the Israelites because they brought sacrifices. I'm too modern for that. I know, I brought that point up a couple of weeks ago, right? But what makes you holy? Doesn't your faith make you holy? The fact that you're willing to do something that you weren't going to do anyway. Right? if I look at all the washing and I say, oh, well, that just makes sense anyway. Kosher foods, that just makes sense anyway. Pork is actually very unhealthy. I'm going to be healthy. It's not because God told me to, it's because I want to be healthy. Okay, well, does that make you holy? To do something that you just find that you want to do? Or does walking by faith make you holy? The fact that you are willing to do something that I actually don't have a good reason for doing this other than God told me. If God told me to do something that I wouldn't have done and I'm willing to do what he asked me to do, that's different. That is stepping in faith. You know? Maybe 80% of what the Torah tells you to do it anyway. It's just good stuff. But then there's 20% that you look at and find alien and strange. Are you willing to do anything that seems alien and strange to you? Because for no other reason, God said so. I'm just asking. I think it makes a big difference in the way that you think about the Bible. Don't be so arrogant. I'm not calling anybody in this room arrogant, but do not have an arrogant attitude that it just makes good sense. We just do it because God told us it's healthy, therefore I do. I don't need another reason. I don't need to go justify God. Okay? I don't need to go soften the rough edges. God is. And I should be willing to accept that. I accept him for who he is. He accepts me. So here's where I want to conclude. When you read a passage, I want to encourage you, do not read a passage in isolation. A passage like this is easily underestimated. I'm barely touching into some of the drash. Really, the lesson that Joshua gave with the connections there, oh my goodness, there's so much in this passage. It's unbelievable. Even when Miguel did this passage, he can tie this into modern examples that can encourage you and build your faith. Don't underestimate the passage. Look at it. Look for parallels, the anti-parallels, the structure, the patterns. There's so much there that's begging you to look at it a little bit closer. Charge into these strange passages with faith and confidence that God is good. God is a God of order. It seems strange. Look at it. Is it as strange as you thought it was? No, the structure of this passage blows my mind. All the words that he uses, including, from the very beginning, the woman bears seed. What? Look at those connections. And finally, hold lightly onto interpretations that you can't explain or you don't understand. When you have been taught something all your life, it's easy to accept it, but I just want to encourage you to be thoughtful. Be very careful that just because you don't understand something, someone may come along and try to force you to believe something. Don't do that either. Let's be careful not to accept anything blindly. Whatever you've been taught, if you've accepted it blindly, be open, but don't just fall into the next ditch you can and accept the next thing blindly. I think true unity comes from a deeper understanding, where if we have a disagreement on what the passage says, let's talk about it. We can probably get a lot more out of it each other if we are willing to disagree and talk and have good conversations. We'll build up this community far stronger than we started. I hope this was a blessing for you. Shabbat Shalom.